Hey everybody, Invisiblekatana here with my review for Resident Evil. Welcome to Raccoon City. It's just not good. So it's Resident Evil. It's my favorite franchise. Got the hat, got the shirts, got the albums and junk, I got the collector's editions, still got my director's cut, which basically, if you want Resident Evil 1 and 2 put together, just play this. It's the first game, and then a demo of the second, because they're separate stories, and that's how it's meant to be. I didn't realize that was cracked on the back. Old school stuff. I probably stepped on it. That's how I lost most of my old games. At least the cases. The movie, it's such a mixed bag. Like if you're hardcore into Resident Evil, you're gonna see it because I mentioned in a couple videos coming up to it. Cautiously optimistic, but it's my favorite franchise above anything. Star Wars, Transformers, even Back to the Future. Resident Evil is number one above everything else. And so I was almost obligated. Like, I have to see it. It's Resident Evil. You gotta see it. And so I was cautiously optimistic. It's like, okay, well, we'll see what happens. That first trailer was really, really trash. And then the international trailer was actually pretty decent. I was like, okay, seems much better, but doesn't mean much. They're still changing a bunch of ridiculous things around. And of course, there will be spoilers in this. So they'll be in the second half. But they're changing a bunch of stuff around, and let's see what happens. We've been waiting forever, and we constantly say the same thing. Like, man, it would be cool if they just did Resident Evil 1. That's all you have to do. Like, the mansion itself, it's good enough. You can do an entire movie in the mansion, and that is fine. It does work. It is easy to do. I mean, I can't say it's, like, easy, but it's easier. It's easier than everyone seems to make it. Like, the original first movie, it was like, all right, they didn't really do the mansion. They mostly did the nest, and it worked out, and I still think that is the best best live action Resident Evil movie that we have so far. It's still the very first live action movie we've had. I think that's the best one out of the original series. If it's gonna even become a series, which they're definitely trying, who knows? I mean, I feel like there's definitely potential because if there's one thing that this movie has that I absolutely love, is the references. This movie looks like Resident Evil for the most part. There are definitely some portions when they're in the RPD where it's like, okay, here's like the front of the RPD, like outside, they show like the front desk, and they're like, okay, but also we're gonna take you to this office, and I'm like, this office looks like it's on the first floor of like a small town building, which they play up the small town element compared to kind of what Resident Evil turned Raccoon City into, which was, especially if you go, Resident Evil 3, it's more of a sprawling city. I mean, especially in the third game, or especially the remake of the third game, they're like, we have a whole subway system and everything. And technically they have that train in the original 3, but it felt more like a subway system that people use like all the time. And in the original, it seemed more special. It probably was the same thing, but it just felt different compared to just like, it's an underground subway system. They built a whole thing out and all that. It didn't seem like it was used nearly as much. And plus, that was actually back in the 90s when people probably didn't do that in small towns, however you want to look at Raccoon City. But they definitely had to look down. Stuff was ripped straight from the remakes. They had the Welcome to Raccoon City sign straight from Resident Evil 2, which I remember that being the very first thing I saw when they were doing like behind the scenes footage. And I was like, oh, I might like this movie. That was the first thing I remember seeing, and I was excited because I was like, they have the actual sign from the game. This might have something. And what it has is the aesthetic. 100%. The looks are down perfect. Not for the characters, but for the world itself, at the very least. You have the signs, you have, all the references, like, here's this diner, like, I mean, I can't even think of the name of the diner because it's literally only in the beginning of Resident Evil 2. It might be an Outbreak, which are like the only games that I haven't had the great fortune of playing, which they need to re-release those or remake them, that'd be fine. But like they spend a bunch of time in the diner, references to all sorts of different Resident Evil stuff. Like they went up to Resident Evil 7 because in the very beginning they actually play Go Tell Aunt Rhody. It's hard to tell because it's done in a different pitch, but they played the tune from that, and I was like, oh, that's really cool. The references are amazing. Tons of great references that I love. And then there's just the rest of the movie. I mean, you've probably already heard it even without spoilers, but Leon, they just massacre him. Like the meme that everybody likes to use, look how they massacre my boy. I don't think it's ever applied greater. Like it's not even the same person. And it's so interesting because it's been a heck of a week for adaptations. We've had recently Cowboy Bebop. And if you want to check out my review for that, that should be up. I'm uploading these at the same time. But I recorded that a few days ago. And ultimately, I was okay with that. I didn't think it was great, but I enjoyed it. And I realized, I was like, these are two different adaptations. One is from, a video game to live action, and one is from an anime to live action. And they really tried to capture the style in Cowboy Bebop, and they did that in some parts and not so much in other parts. And the same was done here. But the reason I think I hate this so much, not just because I love Resident Evil more than I love Cowboy Bebop, but it's also because they've had years. We've had 7, if I'm not mistaken, the last series was 7 live action films. And they clearly paid attention to how much we didn't like a lot of stuff in those old movies. But then they changed all sorts of weird stuff. Like, they changed Leon entirely. They combined the stories of 1 and 2 together, and they threw a bunch of things around. They changed the motivations of characters. And it's like, you took all this time to do things, like, they make the wildest references ever. Like, they did callbacks to, like, the 2002 remake of Resident Evil at, like, the end of the film. They do something so specific, and I was like, no one ever references the thing that they referenced, but they did it literally to a T, like, the exact image. And I was like, holy crap, that is 100% the intro of a, specific part of the game. I shouldn't say intro, but, like, that's what that thing looks like. And yet the story is so far off. It makes no sense. It's confusing, honestly. Like, they put so much detail into the references and callbacks and the aesthetic. And it's said to be like a movie for the fans, which, if you're counting just references and appearance, then it 100% is a movie for the fans, because it's not for anybody else, But just as a movie on its own, it just doesn't work. It's not really entertaining. Like, they don't even get to the point where there's this fun, zombie action moment, as far as I'm concerned. Like, they have one, but I swear it's like one part in the whole movie that's like an actual action moment. Because as much as Resident Evil is like, survival horror and stuff, it's definitely, not even just recently, but even in the past, like, 3 is considered, more action-based compared to 1 and 2. But it still has a decent balance. And when you transfer it into, the movie factor, we kind of expect more of that action balance, and it still works. I oddly enough, once again, I think the old movies did have that, at least in the very first movie. Technically, maybe they had it a little bit in the second one. I kind of hated the second one so much because of Mike Epps, but that's a different topic. But the way that they did it is just like, they took so much time to care about the looks, the history of Resident Evil, throwing references. Some were stupid references where, I'll just say the Itchy Tasty thing. It was like, okay, like, you threw that in there. I classic reference, but the moment in the game where Itchy Tasty comes up, for people who are like deep into the lore, that's a huge deal. That was like one of the coolest elements of that game, because it was the degradation of someone being infected, which technically they kind of show in this. I wouldn't say that's interesting. It was just kind of like, oh, okay. It didn't do much for me because they don't really play with it, so it was kind of just there, and I didn't even register like, oh, that's kind of different. Like, technically the zombies are kind of talking, but they aren't really full-on zombies just yet. And it was like, oh, that's the degradation. I didn't catch any of that because I'm like, it's just stuff is happening, and they don't really make it important in any way, shape, or form. Even when they draw attention to stuff, they're just like, no biggie, who cares? So many issues, and then just so many cool things. All the references, the looks, it's good. And then you have just the story and the characters and the way that they just don't seem to care about really the crux of the series, which is the characters. Sure, everything can look perfect. It could literally look perfect. But it doesn't matter when you have the story being the way that it is. And I think, once again, with the Cowboy Bebop stuff, like I said, the Cowboy Bebop, that was like the first time anyone's done that. I wouldn't expect it to be perfect. It still could have been better. But they have to take that leap and figure things out. This is the 8th live action film. Totally different person, different set of people. But they had 7 other movies to look at to be like, okay, we can not do this, we can change this, we can do this. And you know what people really just want? The actual characters. That's it. Like, they changed like the worst thing. They were like, okay, what? That's like the one thing. Oddly enough, that's probably the one thing that the old series actually did right, was that all the characters kind of seem like themselves. It's just the movies and the whole franchise was kind of garbage, and like people were just dropping in and out of those films as actors and actresses. People just were in and out all the time. So it was like, oh, here's Jill in the second movie. That's not a bad Jill. And then she was gone in the third, and then she came back in like I don't think it was even the fourth. I think she came back in maybe the fifth. Maybe it was the end of the fourth, and she was like a villain in the fifth. And it's just like, they were just like swapping people in and out, but they were kind of the characters. And it was like, still a dumb movie, because they were, once again, the story was so wild and different. It's like they're literally in like a virtual fake underground thing, but you got Leon and Ada. That's kind of nice. And this kind of feels the same way, where it's like, you got all the characters, but this time it's the people that are wrong. Like in that situation, the situation was wrong and the characters are right. And in this, it's the opposite, where the characters I don't feel are who they should be, but the situation is there. And it's like, it's literally like, God, you swapped the wrong stuff. Like you shouldn't have swapped both parts. Just swap the situation, keep the good characters. Everything would have been fine. It may not have been perfect, because I still think the movie definitely suffers from a build-up issue where they don't do enough in the actual movie as far as, like I said, the kind of the action element, and really even the horror element. Like they have some stuff in the beginning that I think was decent. They do like some really like long zooms into the darkness, and it was like, this is actually super creepy, because of course the more it zooms in, the shakier the camera gets. But I like that aesthetic. I was like, this actually is kind of cool. Like you can barely make out images, but someone's there, and you have to wait till the camera zooms like all the way in so you can start making out that image. And I was like, that's really cool. I like how they do that. And it seems like they don't really play up any of the good horror elements like they should. They definitely have bits and pieces, and I'll get into that in spoilers. But yeah, I mean, if you're hardcore, you're probably going to see it no matter what, regardless of recommendation. If you don't even care about Resident Evil, I don't know. It's hard. Like, and it's such a weird thing. Like I said, with the Cowboy Bebop stuff, it's the same thing. Like, if you've never even seen Cowboy Bebop, it's just like, it's hard to recommend either of these things to be like, yeah, you'll enjoy it. It's just like, that, at least that I feel lives or dies on its style, where it's like that weird transition from anime to live action. This is just like, it's every normal movie. There is nothing special that they're really trying. It's not like they're adapting something and it's like, can we transition the style of an anime into live action and try to do things a different way? It's literally just, they made a movie and it's a horror movie, and that's it. There is no unique style or element to it. It's just a movie. So this, I feel like I'd recommend even less than Cowboy Bebop, because they had just so much to look at, and it seemed like they cared so much with all the references. Like I said, references and visuals, they cared a lot, clearly. And yet somehow they were like, we're going to do all this stuff, pay attention to all these little details throughout the universe and everything, and yet we're just going to change a bunch of stuff. We're going to change like the core dynamic of characters and their relationships and stuff like that, and not even utilize that well. Like there's some stuff that they do, which once again we'll get into in spoilers in a minute, where they change character relations, and I'm like, if they focused on that, I might actually like that sequence, but they don't. So that's it for non-spoilers. Not really sure if I can even recommend it or not. I don't think it's really worth checking out if you are not like a big Resident Evil fan. I think, like I said, the very first live action movie, which is insane, because even that, 6 movies later, the same dude, he could have done something, but he didn't. The first movie I still think is the very best one. So we'll see if this one gets a sequel. Maybe they'll do it, because it's like they're literally halfway there. But now the world is so changed, it might not matter if they somehow kind of reverse to get the characters a little bit better. So there's that. There is a mid-credit sequence that you guys can check out as well. There is no post-credit sequence, so there's that. But for now, do as you see fit. I don't know. It's so hard to just recommend it, but do as you see fit as it pertains to the movie. I say it's worth seeing at the very least if you're like a hardcore fan, if you love or even like a lot Resident Evil. Check it out. It's technically a short movie, which might be another reason it's not as great. They needed more time to flesh some things out, but full on spoilers from this point. As you can see, I'm like so conflicted. Like typically I'm just like, I don't like this, I don't like that. I do like this and I do like that. This is just like so weird in the middle, because I'm like, the thing that traps me on it, and full spoilers now, getting into full spoilers. So this is a perfect example. The very beginning of the movie, like I said, they make references. Oddly enough, the first reference was Resident Evil 7. So Lisa Trevor is in the movie, and for one, she doesn't even play a big part. If you don't know Resident Evil, this is a terrible movie to get introduced to her character. Not just because, like most of the other characters, she's not really... I guess technically she is kind of herself. She doesn't really do much. But they don't do anything with it. Like, it's super weird. Like, she's there in the beginning, and she was experimented on for a long time. Okay, that's interesting. There's like so much more to go with that. Like they show the date too. Like they show like how long they experimented on her for, and it's like if you actually look at the date, it's like, oh wow, that's like a super long time. Like they make sure to let you know like it is September, and that's another thing I realized. Actually when I had picked this up, I was like, actually it was when I put my shirt on, I was like, yeah, the first game is in July. Why was this in September? And it was because Resident Evil 2 and 3 are in September, so this isn't really Resident Evil 1 at all. Oddly enough, it's not really Resident Evil 3. It's really just Resident Evil 2 and the Spencer Mansion. That's really what this movie is, because it's not Resident Evil 1, because they're barely in the mansion. Although once again, amazing reference, they did Moonlight Sonata. Couldn't believe it. I could not believe it. Like, he went and they had the Palm Pilot and stuff, and he hits the keys and the door actually opens up, and I was like, wow, they actually put that in there. That's amazing. And it wasn't even stupid. It was like, yeah, they put a secret wall, and it wasn't just to get a plaque, as a part of a puzzle. It was actually like an entrance, which makes way more sense than, obviously all the weird puzzles in the game are silly, and that's just a part of the game is puzzles. But it actually made a ton of sense. It wasn't just like a tiny room where you put a plaque in and replace it. It's literally an actual entrance. It's a secret passageway. And it was like, that makes perfect sense. You have it. You do, a little bit of Moonlight Sonata. The thing opens up. That's your secret passage. I'm sure there's some button somewhere and it closes back down. And it was like, that totally works. In a realistic way, if they're, a secret crazy underground facility, it totally works. I can totally buy them using like that one puzzle in that way, and that was great, and it was super cool. I also found out that the actress who actually plays Jill knows how to play the piano, so that was a missed opportunity where they could have totally done it where Chris can't play the piano, even though he was technically just doing like one at a time, but they didn't have that missed opportunity. But I like that portion. I thought that was really good. Richard was in this. Brad was in this, which this was so dumb. This is a totally pointless random thing. I don't know if anyone even caught this. In the credits of the movie, Brad Vickers is referenced as just Vickers, right? But Annette Birkin has her full name, and I'm pretty sure they never said her name either. And Sherry technically only has her name in the movie because I think her name was like on her door or something like that. But I don't think they call her Sherry. I don't think they call Annette Annette. And that's it. Like it doesn't. It was really weird to me because I'm like, what? I don't think I've ever seen a movie where someone's like, clearly this is this character. We'll just put their full name in, but they literally, excuse me, they literally just put Vickers, and I was like, it's Brad Vickers though. Like, why not just put that as a part of the title? They literally just put Vickers, and I thought that was super weird because, unless I'm mistaken, they definitely don't say, Annette's first name. They don't call her Annette Birkin. She's also not a scientist as well, but she also kind of knew what was going on because even though when they got to the end, Birkin was shot by Wesker, who's obviously like not really Wesker. She basically picked up the gun and she was gonna shoot, blew her brains out. She was out, and I was like, oh, okay, that's interesting. But so she was like half involved. It was kind of weird because she seemed cool, like pulling the gun on him. She wasn't like completely shocked 100%, and she was willing to like shoot him to protect the vials. So I was like, it's a interesting like change of character because it seemed like she didn't even know what was going on with the umbrella stuff. And then when they got down there, and that's how it seemed the whole way through, where they're freaking out. There's like a body, there's a corpse on the. It's not a corpse because I think that person was alive, but there's an open body on the table and stuff. But she was willing to pick up the gun and like take the vials and stuff. I know it was her husband, but it's also like she seemed like super calm about it. It wasn't like she had hesitation. It was like, okay, I'll do this. It seemed like she was just like, okay, cool, I'm gonna pick up this gun and I'm gonna draw on this dude. And of course her brains got blown out. So I was like, that's a little weird. Even Sherry pulling the gun I thought was weird. It was just like an odd moment to have her even bother doing that. But once again, weird dynamics for characters, and like I said, the naming thing at the end, it was just something I happened to notice. I was like, why wouldn't they just put Brad Vickers? Like, people do that a lot of times in movies where they might only say someone's name. Sometimes they'll still have a full name in the credits, and since this is literally based on Brad Vickers from the game, it seems super weird to me that they wouldn't put his first name in there in the credits. And like I said, pretty sure they don't say Annette's name. They probably did in passing, but I don't know. It would have been easier if I would have known if maybe for like half a second they bothered to utilize the relationship they built in the movie between Chris and the Birkin family, because that was interesting. I was like, oh, I would have liked to have actually seen something to come from that, which all we got was the end fight where Birkin was kind of losing his mind and he was like, kind of just went bad villain mode and was like, you think I'd let you into my family and stuff, and then he gets taken out, and then he's like, Chris, my boy, which is, could have been just him going crazy and being angry or whatever, and then he realized like, oh no, it's my son. I would have liked to have seen that. I mean, they were, as much as they changed, they could have at least focused on it. Like, I mean, they focused a bunch on Leon being a shitty character, and that I hated. I think most people did. I think even outside of Resident Evil, even if you don't know, he's just like a crappy cop. Like, I don't think there are a lot of people that would watch him in the movie and be entertained by his character. Even if you don't know Resident Evil and you see how they changed him so much, I don't think people would enjoy that character in general. Like, he wakes up and he's, that's just a normal thing. Like, he's waking up and he drinks the beer and stuff. So he's like the rookie who's inexperienced and he shot his partner in the butt and, he's been sent off. But he's just incompetent. But, like, he's full on incompetent. And he swears a bunch. Everyone does. That was a weird thing with this movie. I swear they had a lot of F-bombs in this. And it was just people just being like, I'm shocked. So let me drop an F-bomb. Or let me say F. Let me say S. Let me say F again. Let me drop a couple of those. Like, it was really weird. Like, everything was what the fuck, oh fuck, oh fuck, oh shit, oh fuck. Like, that was like the whole movie. For like a giant chunk, I felt that's all everybody kept doing. Every time they were surprised, it wasn't a single person that was just like, oh crap. Like, everyone was on the exact same level of, I have to say fuck, otherwise the point won't come across. Like, people say it in different ways. You can be like, oh crap, I can't believe this, oh my god, something. Every person was just like, fuck or shit. And I was like, it just feels weird. They say it so much. And they do it, even one character saying it a bunch was weird. But then everyone says the same thing. It was like, does not a single person say anything outside of fuck or shit? Like, someone could just be surprised and just go like, oh. And then you just stop at oh, because that's how shocked you are. But nope, everybody got it. Like, we have to say it or it doesn't count. It was really weird. But he was mumbling. That was weird. Chris and Claire's relationship, them being a part of the orphanage and stuff like that, and we don't know a lot about Chris and Claire's past or anything, so it was okay. I would have preferred, this would have once again changed the whole story and crap, but I would have preferred it if it wasn't a part of the Umbrella facility and they knew Birkin or anything, and it was just they happened to be at the orphanage, they grew up, and then the orphanage later became something that was tied to Umbrella. I feel like that would make perfect sense because Umbrella technically, I don't know, I'm going with technicals when it comes to this movie, because obviously they changed so much. It's not like they're going based on the 100% lore of Resident Evil, so I guess it doesn't really matter. But in the story, Umbrella is kind of what came along, much like in the movie. You can tell Umbrella came along, and that's what helped boost Raccoon City as a whole. And it was like, okay, if they kind of put that, if they retcon that into the game, like if they did that for RE2, I would be like, okay, I could totally see that. It was originally just a normal orphanage, creepy enough, in any movie. Because they always make them creepy, unless it's like Mike. And then, later on, Umbrella came into town, then they made the whole facility and all that stuff. That totally could have worked. But instead it was Chris and Claire are related to everything going on there. Claire was almost taken, and then she escaped. And I guess she just ran out the front door, and that was it. They were the only 5 people in the whole building that were like adults to like corral these kids, which I thought was super weird. But they explained it, and it was like, and she left for 5 years, and that's weird that she didn't ever just come back or anything like she knew where he was, she knew where he lived and everything, so she never like just sent a letter, gave a little call, did anything to just be like, hey, they were about to like take me somewhere weird and it got a little awkward and I took off because I was scared of what was going to happen. Just nothing. She left and never said anything to him, and it was just weird. It was like, we got the answer, but it was like, that's a weird way to leave things. And then he grew up with Birkin, which we never see. Once again, changing that whole dynamic where Chris is the one who knows Sherry. Like, Sherry is technically Chris's little sister in this. I would have loved to have seen that. I'm like, okay, you're changing dynamics. That's a cool dynamic. Make Sherry even closer to the Redfield characters. And technically, she'd be closer to Chris than to Claire compared to the games. But totally fine. He was literally raised as a part of that family. And Sherry's like, Sherry might as well not have even been in it, honestly. Like, I don't think she has a single line of dialogue outside of that beginning dream sequence where I believe she is referencing the hunter, because she mentioned like it was slimy and had yellow eyes, and I was like, I think that's supposed to be a reference to the hunters. So that was interesting. But man, there's just so much. I feel like I have to do like an actual like full just deep dive on this. I feel like it's one of those things where I can't get it all out in a review, and I just want to talk about it. So maybe at a later time, a couple weeks or so, I'll like, gather some thoughts. I might do it, I might not, but it's just crazy. There's so much in this where I see that they cared, but somehow they cared enough to do all these amazing aesthetic things, the references, but they changed the characters, and not in like a good way. And once again, leading back to the Cowboy Bebop thing, I felt like what they did there was, if a character was at a 5, maybe they put him at a 7. It's like, okay, it's more exaggerated compared to the anime, which is somewhat ironic, I guess. But I still feel like the base of that character is there. They just made them more in a certain way. At least for some of the characters. Some of the other characters, if you haven't seen Cowboy Bebop, they just don't do right at all. But some I'm like, okay, I can at least see that that's that character. Maybe just more outgoing or more of whatever their base personality is. It's just more because it's live action. In this, it was just like, no, this character is just different. Leon is obviously 100% different. Just about everybody I feel is different, honestly. I mean, Chief Irons, I guess, was still Chief Irons. He was a dick, and I'm like, I guess that probably fits. So I guess technically he was fairly accurate. No, I mean, I guess Richard was kind of just Richard. He had a shotgun, so there was that. Brad was a pilot, so there was that. Wesker just wasn't Wesker. Chris, I guess, was still Chris, aside from his relationship with Claire. And Claire was technically probably still Claire. Like, she was still the one, she was still, like, kind of just going out to solve a problem. She was technically still looking for Chris. So there are elements that are still there, but as a complete package, it's like, I don't know if this really works. But that's the movie. Also, Chris should have died like 3 times. That's what I'm talking about. Speaking of Richard, the scene when Richard was killed on the stairs, and Chris was being held down by like 3 zombies and he had no weapons. I thought Richard was gonna die in that scene, but I thought he was gonna die because he's shooting zombies, and then it's like, oh, Chris needs help. I figured he would point the shotgun down and start like blasting the zombies off of him to save his buddy, and then he would get killed from the side. But none of that happened. He was just shooting more zombies, and then they surrounded him and killed him. And then they cut back to Chris, who was literally pinned on a wall, 3 zombies coming at him, and then he was just off running. And I'm like, how did that happen at all? That doesn't even make sense. And then the scene with the lighter, where he's like, he's flicking the lighter, of course referencing the fact that Chris was the one that had the lighter, Jill was the one that would have the lockpick, even though Claire did do some lockpicking in this, which I think that's also typically her thing as well. I think they always kind of set that where it was like, no, because Claire had the lighter. Claire had the lighter in her game. But, like he had the lighter and stuff. And so he's flicking the lighter. And the zombie's coming at him. And then he flicks it. And then the zombie, I guess, runs around in the darkness to hit him with the jump scare from behind. And I'm like, that doesn't make any sense whatsoever. The zombie would have killed him because that's what zombies do. Also, they did that with the liquor, where I was like, they literally like destroyed the fundamental base of what the liquor does, which is if you make noise, it comes after you. Amazing introduction where the lights are like moving and you don't know what's happening. I love that. That was 100%. That was probably like the perfect moment in the entire film where I was like, that is like one of the most beautiful introductions for the liquor I've ever seen, because I didn't even understand it. In my head, I went way out there. I was like, they're just saying fuck it now, and Mr. T is going to come down the stairs. I honestly thought he was just walking upstairs and was going to come down. It doesn't make any sense, but I would have loved it. It would have been cool. But we still got a nice sequence. Liquor comes out. Like I said, they completely destroyed the... excuse me. The main basis for it, which is you can't make sound. Leon is like, hey guys, come over here. And he's talking and everything, but for whatever reason, Chief Irons just randomly gets killed. The dude who was in the back that made the least noise, he just got killed. And it was like, I guess they were just like, we got to get him out of here for the end of the movie, so let's just kill him this way. But I'm like, you had the liquor. Just the ugly, horrible CG looking, like the CG was still bad on it. The dog, I still think was the worst. I don't know if the dog or Birkin was the worst. I think the liquor was actually the best CG, but the dog was definitely the worst in the parking lot. And then and then I guess Birkin after that. So still, still bad CG, but they had the liquor, they had the basis for it. They even have Lisa go like, and she points up because like, obviously you have to be quiet because it's the liquor. But it literally didn't make any difference because it attacked the one person who made the least amount of noise. Like, he didn't even walk as far as Claire did, so she walked further, and Leon was still talking. So I'm like, it doesn't even make sense that he would be attacked. But once again, that's just this movie. They have stuff in here where it's like, that's really good. And then you literally, the next second, ignore the main basis for the thing you just introduced. Because you know what it does in the game. You know the whole point behind it. You have Lisa point it out, like, hey, you gotta be quiet because the liquor's up there, and then you ignore like the main basic principle of what the liquor does, and it doesn't attack Leon because of course Leon's a main character. So it's just like, why did you do that? Have him get attacked but live or something. You like, I don't know, have it make noise like it's about to jump down, and they hear it as it's like about to run towards them or something, because it went past them, and then he sees Lisa, but whatever. So they do this stuff. Lisa just kills the liquor. Cool sequence that's just crazy. Would Lisa Trevor actually be able to beat a liquor? I don't know. Maybe she does have insane super strength. She has insane healing abilities, but so does Liquor. That's kind of the whole point. So it was interesting. It was like, I wonder how that would have played out, had they done it in the games. So that was cool. A little bit of, fanfic canon. Was like, all right, I can appreciate that. And then she just, it's like, all right, thanks, Lisa. See you later. But not really, because she died in the city. Very odd. They just threw her. They didn't even need to bother having her in the movie. They didn't even utilize her. So she was wasted. Birkin was wasted. I mean, everyone was wasted, but like even the fake, the new relationships they built were just wasted. Like, yes, Lisa helped Claire and Leon get down the elevator. She even gave her the keys. Great reference. But just like pointless. Chris has this relationship with Birkin. It's not really utilized. Chris has a relationship with Sherry. She doesn't talk. Like she's got nothing. So it's just weird. Like they have these things in here where I'm like, it should have been a show. Even if this was a show where they changed all the characters like that, it still could have been better. They still could have just played on those relationships, even maybe have done flashbacks possibly just to flesh it out. I don't know. But there is so much that was there, and then so much that they were just like, it's unfortunate. That's about it. So thanks for checking this out. It's just so weird. I'm not gonna watch this again, but there's so much I loved about it. Just looking at the movie is like the best part, and that probably doesn't even make sense. But like visually, just seeing the movie is the best part of the whole movie. The actual story, the actual characters. It's not good. That's so sad. But maybe they'll get a sequel. We got Netflix doing their own series. Once again, just make the first effing game into a show or a movie. That's all they have to do. Everyone keeps trying to change stuff and do this and add that. I hate the stupid changing of the seasons, making my throat so dry. But I would love to know your thoughts on this. Before I like completely pass out because my throat stings so bad right now. I would love to know your thoughts on this. Whether you're a huge fan, not a huge fan, check it out. If you like even horror, I can't say action. One decent action sequence, but if you like horror and for whatever reason you were like, let's check out that Resident Evil movie, we'd love to know your thoughts. If you like Resident Evil, we'd love to know your thoughts. If you hate Resident Evil, we'd love to know your thoughts. At the very least, we can say we have another Resident Evil movie. Silent Hill fans just suffer in turmoil, and that's unfortunate. I'd also like to give a public apology. I did this on Instagram, but I would like to apologize to Resident Evil Survivor. We always said it was so much crap, and I should have done this apology when the last movie came out, because this is definitely better than the final chapter. I can at the very least say that. This is so much better than that last movie. They defied physics in that, and fire poured down. That movie's so bad. This one's just so disappointing. Sometimes that's worse. Would love to know your thoughts. Sorry this was so long, but yeah, there's a lot to think about here. Please put your comments down in the comment section below. And of course, thanks for watching.